Haha, greetings, good afternoon, wherever you might be watching from, in the past, present, future, or whenever. Welcome, one and all. We're on a fun trip today. As you normally know, I'm broadcasting from the magical land of Yorkshire. And today I am very, very pleased indeed, to have a wonderful guest today joining us, Mike, who also goes by the secret pseudonym, probably also the mayor of Trumpton.
Not so secret anymore, I'm afraid. But yeah.
But like I say, Mike, I'll let you introduce yourself, and you can tell sort of the audience who you are and sort of what you do.
Okay, that's always a difficult thing, basically. But in this context, about 15 years ago, I took over the town of Trumpton because I was trying to work out why Nigel Farage looked back at the past thinking Britain was a much nicer place, because he's about my age, scarily. And I was just trying to work out what was it about 1970s Britain that he was so fond of. Because, as I remember, it was a bit shit, basically. But I had a hula hoop, and I used to love watching Trumpton. It was one of my favourite shows. And I went back and looked at an episode of Trumpton, and I happened to find the one episode where, for those that don't know, it's a stop-motion animation town, very British town that was a children's TV show. There were spin-offs for Chigley and Camberwick Green, and people might remember Windy Miller and all sorts of things. But Trumpton itself, largely the format of the show was that the mayor had a problem in the town, and he would call the fire brigade out, and they would come and fix it. In this one episode I watched, an ice cream salesman called Tony turns up, very Italian-looking ice cream man, tries to take over a spot on the town square where the flower seller worked, and the mayor calls out the fire brigade to get rid of him. And I just thought, oh, this is the Britain that Nigel Farage looks back at. An entitled, unelected leader who uses pseudo-military organisations of state to get immigrants out. So I did a couple of jokes, just stealing some clips from Trumpton, and at the time, UKIP, as his limited company was called at the time, UKIP were hunting Twitter for fake accounts. There was a lot of fake UKIP accounts. Now it turns out Reform are setting up their own fake account. But no, they were looking out for fake accounts, and I got called out by Patrick O'Flynn, their PR guy, as being a fake account. He called that out to his 9,000 followers or something, and I literally replied saying, "What was it about the puppets that gave me away?" And I think it was just a quiet Friday night, and Twitter exploded in one of the ways that Twitter does, and I ended up with sort of 20,000 followers, and now, I don't know, 40 or 50,000 followers that we've been campaigning against Nigel Farage for 15 years, and we've done a great job because now he's an MP. So, as Peter Cook says, satire is a powerful weapon. Look how it got rid of the Nazis, basically. So,
I don't know how I sort of expected Nigel Farage might win. I really hoped he wouldn't, but I had my feelings that this time he might do it. And on election night, when I was live streaming, my town, Sky News gave me a heart attack because they were predicting 99% Reform victory. And I went from being really optimistic from the exit poll to being like, no.
Are you north, south, east, West Yorkshire?
Well, South Yorkshire.
South Yorkshire, right? Okay.
Yeah, Barnsley North. Barnsley North.
Okay. I can totally imagine that's a possibility.
Yeah, luckily both went to Labour.
Good.
So. Yeah,
I mean the exit poll was slightly terrifying, 13 to 16 Reform MPs. But I took solace in the fact that John Curtis had said that quite often the exit poll is wrong by 10 to 15 votes, 10 to 15 seats, and I just kind of hoped that they were mainly Reform seats that were going to go. I don't have a big problem with Farage winning and actually having to be responsible for himself, declaring his financial interests and having to meet the people of Clacton once a week, which I don't imagine he'll do for 1 minute. But
that's going to be interesting, I think, because Farage is an MP. I don't think he's going to last his full term. I really don't, because he's got all his financial interests. Is he's right? He's got to declare. He's actually got to go to Clacton once a week and
Well, no, he doesn't.
interact with them.
Do you know he doesn't? I researched this, right? There is absolutely no obligation on an MP to ever visit their constituency. There are historically there's been some MPs that have been elected and then moved to America and never set foot in the country again. Basically, you just don't have to. It's part of our ridiculous non-constitutional system that Farage keeps trying to defend our constitution when we don't have one.
I think he's going to.
It's all a gentleman's club, and Farage is no gentleman. So
I think he'll come up against it. I mean, I don't know if you remember when George Galloway was not Bristol, not Bournemouth. Oh,
which of the many seats was he running for? Basically,
yeah, Bradford. That's it. He was in Bradford, and the Bradford newspaper at the time, multiple people were writing in almost a weekly to complain about him, that they hadn't seen him, that they wanted to sort of get in contact with him, that they couldn't, that they'd raised an issue with him, and it wasn't being brought up.
I don't imagine he reappeared in Rochdale at all, did he, except for the election?
Yeah. I think he's going to have a very, very short honeymoon, because I think the people of Clacton are going to find out very, very quickly how uncomfortable it is not having an MP.
Well, I honestly think, I don't know if you saw today that Ben Habib, who was the deputy leader of Reform, has been tweeting today that he's been usurped and Richard Tice has been given his job. And you think, well, that serves you right for not being in a Democratic Party, Ben.
Yeah.
And to be going public means that there's already a fraction within Reform. And I think the biggest, I don't think it will be the people of Clacton. I think they'll be quite proud of them, of having a famous MP, to be honest with you. Particularly the ones that voted for him. But I do think that Reform will collapse because the weight of those egos, Lee Anderson and Richard Tice and Nigel Farage in one meeting together.
Yeah,
there is absolutely no room in that party for any ego once you put Nigel Farage in the room.
What's the Wild West saying? This town ain't big enough for 5 egos.
No. I don't know much about Rupert Lowe, but I'm assuming that he might have to be the peacemaker in this situation. But no, I think they'll fall apart internally. I think Lee Anderson will defect somewhere, probably the Ulster Unionists. I think that's about all he's got left, isn't it? Or Sinn Féin. I like to think he'll join Sinn Féin and then never turn up for Parliament. And I think Farage will just continue to embarrass himself in that situation. I don't know. I like the report from the Lib Dem MP that was saying that he was already drunk by the time he got there on taxpayer-subsidised booze. The guy's getting 96 grand of our money every year now for pontificating that rubbish, and I think there should be an uprising about that.
Like I say, I don't think he's going to survive too long, to be honest. I mean, and then come November, he'll be off.
Trump,
helping Trump. So
the whole thing, Farage is like Trump, right? They're very, very similar characters, and so is Boris. And I think, for me, I always say, like, I'm a failed psychopath because I've got some morals, basically, but I know all the techniques. Those guys don't have any morals, and they're just psychopaths. But they actually always tell the truth. You just have to listen for it. And Farage has been saying since that Birmingham event that he did, the rally that he did in Birmingham, he's been saying this is a movement. Imagine rallies like this every week. And you think, yeah, I can imagine it. 45 quid a head for a bunch of people that just want to hear you spout some racist nonsense and then buy some merchandise. That's Trump's business model. And the issue with these guys is that they're just so cheap. Like, if Putin wanted to influence our politics, he could do it by buying a bottle of gin off Nigel. It's literally that easy. Blow smoke up their bum and give them a little bit of cash.
I have to wonder if that's going to come up during his time. Will what's going to catch him out? Will it be an expenses scandal, or will it be something else? Will we find out he went to like the Russian embassy and then didn't take a junior minister with him to sort of record the meeting? He's broken parliamentary procedure. Wouldn't surprise me.
There's hope. We have to have some faith that the parliamentary system will do it. Keir Starmer appointed an independent ethics guy who can bring their own cases, so they don't have to be brought up by members now from Parliament. And I think once that passes into law, that'll be interesting, because I think that's when Farage is going to get caught out, and others in the House. You know, there's plenty of candidates that got elected last week that I think have got some very dubious funding and connections that you know, are going to be
I
interesting.
really want to see the second jobs get pushed. I really want to see that sort of go through, and I really hope that does go through.
Farage was on not OnlyFans, but probably on OnlyFans for all we know, basically. But he was on Cameo from his office in the House of Commons, recording messages for people for 50 quid. You know,
like I say, unfortunately, he's in demand, and it's weird why he's such in demand sometimes, because you think, given this his manifesto, or his manifesto, his contract.
Yeah.
You know, his economic policy was essentially like giving Liz Truss speed. It's a bit of a weird manifesto to be pushing when
Liz Truss on cocaine. That would be a nightmare. Yeah, no, you're right. But he knew all along that he would never have to deliver on any of those promises anyway. So you know, it's fine. And I think you're right. Just to go back to your point, I think he will bugger off to America, because that's a lucrative gig for him as well. And you know, it's all about his media personality. Being an MP doesn't, as we've seen with, you know, Jacob Rees-Mogg just got himself a reality TV show with his horrible children.
Oh, that is going to be, I think, for some people out there, for like some satirist, someone is going to satirize that. They're either going to put like their own version of it.
You can't satirize Rees-Mogg, because Rees-Mogg is satirizing himself and posh people, basically. So it's impossible. All you can never do is repeat his words, you know, and just say he said this. Basically, it's like, I think there's going to be a lot of right-wing people on reality TV. The reality, you know, in general, I think that's when we talk about this performative politics that we've all struggled through for the last certainly 6 years. That's what's been happening. It's been a reality TV show, the House of Commons. And I am very hopeful. I don't have heroes. I don't hero worship Keir Starmer by any stretch of the imagination, but I genuinely think a competent person that wants to come in and serve, and it's just very difficult to imagine the circumstances under which he would end up corrupted. You know, I was saying to somebody the other day, I think if one of his children was kidnapped, maybe he might make a decision that he didn't judge, basically, and we probably would all be on his side in that situation, basically. Yeah. But I can't imagine how much money it would cost to corrupt him, and therefore I kind of hope that there's going to be a clean-up operation, and we end up maybe bored with it, you know. And I go off and develop some new cartoon format about football or something, because politics becomes a bit boring, basically.
I mean, my personal philosophy, where I come from politics, I always come from a very hopeful, optimistic version of politics, and I know I annoy a lot of people on YouTube from all kinds of sectors, just because I come across as so hopeful. You know, I'm really
annoy people on every side of the argument. Basically,
I'm really hopeful about my politics, and I'm really unapologetic about it as well. But you know, sometimes you don't get everything you want, but that's politics. But I think really one of the things is, as you said, competence. I think we are underestimating just how good having a competent government will be again. Yeah. You know, I said this to sort of, again, like yourself, multiple people. You're not just electing Keir Starmer. You know, you're electing who's going to be in the Home Office, Foreign Office, all the way down through the committees, how they're going to act with like the civil service.
I mean, I'm lucky enough. I live in Brighton, and I used to live in Hove, which is part of the city but a separate constituency. And Peter Kyle, the MP for Hove, is in the cabinet as the digital minister. And I just know how hard he's been working for the last 6 months on what to do from day one. You know, and you just know that nobody in the Tory, as far as I know, I like to be reasonably fair and say that there might still have been a few Tories that cared about what they were doing. It's difficult to pin one down right now. Yeah. You know, I think Alex Chalk, probably in prisons, is the only one that I've come across that was still trying to do anything. But actually, I think every single minister has been charged by Keir to, you know, work out what your first 100 days are and what your 5-year plan is and how we get elected in 5 years' time. Been given the tools to make that happen, and I think he'll sack them if they don't do it.
Yeah.
So it's and that's what you want, isn't it?
Yeah,
Basically.
it's competent government. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a revelation. I think it's almost a shame that we have to sort of say to people, we've got competent government again. It's a bizarre notion that we just haven't had for such a long time. But
Yeah. And pragmatism as well. I think one
yeah,
of the key things I'm taking. I saw a great interview with David Lammy on Pod Save America recently. So he was talking to an American audience with obviously a friend.
I have
who
such a
runs that
man
pod.
crush on David Lammy. I honestly
Yeah.
do. Like, I read his thing he put out about having like a progressive realism foreign policy, and I'm just like,
Realism
thank
and
you.
pragmatism. Yeah. Where he talks about the fact that I cannot deal with the world on the basis of how I'd like the world to be. I have to deal with the world in what I'm presented. So while Keir Starmer's talking to Biden at NATO, Lammy is talking to MAGA Republicans because he might have to deal with them.
Yeah.
And he needs to get some friends there, basically. And I think that's the approach. And he talks about just having a respect for any country and their position, basically, and not being, not taking this sort of attitude of we're better than you and we shouldn't even talk to you, basically.
Yeah, and that's why I was so bizarre when I remember those news stories first came out that Lammy had been talking to like Republicans, and I'm like, well, of course he's got to, because what do you do if Trump wins? You can't just ignore America for the next 4 years.
50-50 risk we get an idiot fascist dictator in America elected, and
you just can't ignore him. And so I think certainly from my view, when it comes to sort of foreign policy, I think has so far really shown some good gumption. I mean, immediately, almost as soon as he got the job, straight off into Europe. Met with Germany, met with Poland, met with I think Sweden as well.
Macron posted today about what a change it was to be discussing things with the new team. Although I'm not sure you want Macron backing you at the moment. His decision making might not be the best. But isn't it interesting? We've ended up almost. It's like James O'Brien talks a lot about you for the last 15 years. You got everything you wanted, Tories and Brexiteers, and yet still you're massively unhappy. And now we're living in a moment where, from my point of view, we got everything I wanted. We've got a Labour majority, which means that we can do something. We've got a Labour leader who's not ideologically driven, but is service driven. We've got a chance to reset our position in the world and get some respect back, which, Brexiteers and Tories should have wanted all the way along. All those things are laid out for us at the moment, and possibly a chance, I think, at the moment, politically, to be the leader of the free world again, because America is at risk, basically, and France is in a mess, and Germany's in a bit of a mess, and Europe at the moment is lurching off to the right in various places, and I think we might be the only sensible government, from my perspective, around at the moment.
I am really hopeful that there is going to be sort of a turnaround. I think you saw in France where they sort of blocked the far right, and I'm hopeful that the left and sort of the centre there have to come together. They have to come together, and they have to work together. They have to compromise, and they have to, make sure that they get stuff done themselves. The left isn't going to get everything they want. The centre is probably going to have to give some ground as well. But if they don't, Marie Le Pen's right behind them.
Yeah,
and I think that will drive a lot of. Again, I'm ever hopeful that will drive a lot of ambition to sort of work together in that government.
And make no mistake, Farage and Suella and Priti Patel and Badenoch and all of those people will be wandering around trying to cause havoc for this government, basically. And Farage is our Le Pen. It keeps cropping up. You can't, and I think you're right. You have to work against them rather than it. I'd love to think you could just ignore them and they go away, but they won't.
No.
So it's interesting. I think we're in a really interesting period. I've been talking to a few, like yourself. There's quite a few people over the last 10 or 15 years that I've come to know who live in a similar territory to me on social media in terms of centrist dad, or I'm quite proud to call myself a centrist granddad these years.
I know I'm annoying the right people when I get called the centrist dad.
Yeah, no, I get offended by it because I go, no, actually, I'm a centrist granddad. So, it's.
I don't even have any children. I'm like, what's the...
But it's, yeah, I think we're going to have to continue. Well, we've got to work out now what we do, because I fully intend to be critical of the government if they get things wrong. In fact, I'll be honest with you, because some of them are my friends, basically, which is always a bad place to be when you're a satirist. I will be harder on them than anyone else. If Peter Kyle screws up, he's in for it. And that's a warning, Pete, if you're watching, basically, because he won't be, because he'll be working. But, literally, I think if they let me down, I'll be even crosser, basically, because...
I mean, it's inevitable, really. No government gets, like, every single call right. It's absolutely impossible to be a government that does that.
Who would want to make...
There are things going to go wrong. And
who would want to make those decisions? COVID...
Yeah.
I actually have some sympathy for Boris for being in that situation, because I'd have had a lot more respect if he just went, "Oh, sorry, this isn't the kind of thing I can do. I'll resign." Basically, that would have been a good thing to do. But you would not want to make decisions that involve life and death on that basis, and you're going to upset somebody, obviously, at some point in time by making those decisions.
And this is where it comes back to the competence discussion we've just had, because you're going to have a government that is going to approach when we get problems, like if the war in Ukraine gets worse, or we have another COVID outbreak or something like that. They're going to approach it with a lot more competence and pragmatism than we've had from the last lot. So there's a lot, I think, really to be hopeful. And I think even the first couple of days we've seen some good stuff already. Ed Miliband today announcing no more drilling licenses in the North Sea. He's lifted the offshore wind farm ban
and onshore as well, basically. Yeah.
So,
7.5 billion fund to invest in the first year, basically. Yeah. And they've got political capital, and they've got to use it. I was just listening to a podcast which was saying, I think, to mention the devil himself, Tony Blair, said that when you come into government with a majority, that you are quite often you have a huge amount of political power and no experience. And when you leave government, you have no political power and a huge amount of experience that becomes wasted. And I think that's, the good thing is that Keir has experience of running a large department and a controversial department in government. And that's rare. We very rarely have normally it's just a PPE from Oxford and you're in, basically. So, the fact that he knows how government works, the fact that Sue Gray is embedded in there, the fact that Lucy Powell has spent the last year working out a legislative programme for the Labour Party that means that they can work cross-party. That I'd love to see him reaching out across the aisle to the Lib Dems and even the Tories. Definitely not Reform, and the Greens to just okay, let's work together, because it's the other thing I know, that when I play in the world of trying to get a visual, like my ideal post is a political joke where I don't even have to write any words, where it's a visual gag and you get it, you know what it's saying. But I still have to write words mostly on them, and that frustrates me. So, I spend time drawing a picture, building an image, and then working out what I want them to say in the most concise way to make it a clear joke. And that means that, I'm effectively creating memes, or whatever they're called, and just headlines, and just poking the pompous. That's the point of what I do, I guess, trying to hit a zeitgeist. But the reality of politics is nothing like that, really. It's not a football situation. It's not a black and white binary choice on everything. I know that MPs from both sides during the last Parliament and the Parliament before that worked together. And it's the only way you actually get anything done, really, is to bring both sides together. And so it's interesting what you do as a satirist, because this account was set up because I saw the rise of Farage as a problem, and I wanted to do something about it. And that brought together an alliance of anti-Tory, anti-Farage people. And now, we were just talking before we started this, today in particular, I'm suffering from, having poked people on my own team, effectively, that you realise that, all these people that claimed all the way through the last 5-6 years since Boris, certainly, that said we need a progressive alliance, And I used to say, "Oh God, please don't ask me to chair those meetings. That would be a nightmare. That would just be a nightmare." I always say, if you think being prime minister is difficult for Keir Starmer, you should imagine what it's like to manage the Labour Party, let alone a progressive alliance. It's like a bag of cats trying to kill each other, and I think that's what is happening right now. Certainly, I might be provoking some of it, but we are going to have some internal debates about the direction we want the Labour Party to go, the government to go, and
but that's what normally happens anyway from any government. I mean, technically, that's what we've seen from the Conservative Party for the past couple of years. Their sort of internal arguments that have now. Well, I don't know if you've been following the outright Tory civil war that is now broken out into.
Well, it's always been there, hasn't it? But Christ, Suella, when did she register the SuellaForLeader.com site? Wish she was accused of doing it 3 months early. I think she's probably had it for 5 years. But I think what we've got to be very careful of on the progressive side, let's call it that, is that we have to have discussions about these things, and some of them will be difficult discussions to have as well. But we have to have discussions that are not wars, that are not infighting, that are not football matches, because if we can't discuss and address and deal with them and try to make people comfortable with a way forward, then we are going to have the same problem that the Tories had. And I'm, as a centrist granddad, I've been around long enough to see these 15-year cycles of government anyway. I've seen 3 significant changes in government in my life in 57 years, and from Thatcher Major to Blair, from Blair to Cameron, and now back to Starmer. And ultimately that cycle happens. The Labour Party will run out of steam in 14 years' time. Mark my words.
Yeah.
That's a prediction. Because that just happens, and the country will change, it will shift, and hopefully there'll be an opposition that's going to pick up the mood of the country in 15 years' time. But in an ideal world, what you do is build a coalition that actually does work.
So I don't know if you know too much about Canadian politics, but this is again area.
I have a cartoon of Trudeau because I did feature on CBC once. I have some friends in Canadian broadcasting that. And I felt I had to draw Trudeau at that point.
Yeah. So I don't know if you know the trouble that Justin Trudeau ran into. He used to be in alliance when he first got elected with I think it was another party. They decided to pull support from him. And then along came the Liberal Party. And they were like, okay, we'll give you a supply of confidence agreement so you can keep your government running. But here's what we'd like to do. And they achieved quite a lot, and especially in Canada, because of the agreement that they struck with that Liberal Party, a lot more people in Canada have more dental care than they ever had before. So they achieved quite a lot through working together, and they did that by not getting everything they wanted, but also be willing to compromise on some stuff as well. So that is a perfect example of what we really, really need to see, I think, over the next couple of years. Working together.
And I think if we can remove some of these culture war issues, which are not real, they're not real issues. They are complicated, nuanced, and difficult issues to deal with various people that need to be protected in that situation, and we need to remove those from our dialogue. GBBs and the Rees-Mogg show and everything else will try and keep them front and centre, and Farage will, but ultimately, the more we can do to just demonstrate exactly what you say, that look, we're compromising and we're admitting we're compromising, but how else do you actually move forward unless you actually
exactly. I mean, what question is going to come next? What are some of the things that you would like to see, I think, over the next sort of 5 years?
In terms of what the government,
in terms of either what the government will do or policy that you would like to see the Labour government sort of put forward.
Well, it's interesting, because quite often I'm commenting on these things and not sitting there going over the ideas. I mean, I've got some harebrained ideas on what we could do to improve politics, but I'll be honest with you, and I think this is something that they discarded early on and probably shouldn't have done, but I don't think they expected to get the majority they got. Is I think they have enough of a majority and political capital to do something about reforming the parliamentary system, the House of Lords, and in particular. And I think it's time we, bit the bullet and upgraded our electoral system. I hate to end up in Farage's camp, basically, and no party with a majority like that is going to go for PR. Even the Lib Dems, I think, will go a little bit quieter on PR, having worked out how to win in the first past the post
It's
system.
all about bungee jumping.
Yeah. So, that's not going to happen. But I think reform of the House of Lords and actually maybe introducing some form of PR to a section of that so that we can try it out.
I agree with you on that. I mean, House of Lords, we think Parliament's been bad for the past, couple of years. The House of Lords,
is a mess.
Happens on a weekly basis. What happened in 5 years is almost a week in the House of Lords. It's such
See, I've got a theory on that I think we should go back to the Greek model of this and sojourn people into the House of Lords. So essentially, you just draw lots like jury service, and if you're drawn at random, then you're paid the equivalent of your current annual salary to go to the House of Lords plus expenses. And we could fill the place with millionaires and plumbers, basically, and teachers and care workers, and not entirely. I think you need a few lawyers in there, guaranteed, basically, to check the laws. But yeah, I think working out how to clean up Parliament. There is another, if we're going to have a 10-year government, and God, we shouldn't say that because people thought Boris would be there for 10 years, and that didn't last very long, did it? But if we are going to have a long-term government with a long-term plan, I think we, really simple things like we have to look at the House of Commons and go, this is not fit for purpose anymore. It's full of rats and floods and sewage and leaks, and that's just Nigel Farage. It seems to me that we need to make that fit for the 21st century as well.
Yeah,
I'm really keen on the devolution thing and the metro mayors. I think politically, it's a really clever move. To do what he's doing, because
Ben Houchen didn't look pleased.
Yeah, well, you see what I think he can do, and this is if it's what he's doing, it's genius. I think, right, which is that you can leave the politics to people like Ben Houchen and Andy Burnham to fight on their own territories. And what you do is you give them enough powers as a mayor to do something about the problems, but you also let them do the politics of it. And you just say, as central government, we're going to enable you to do this. We're going to give you a council to discuss this. You're going to be equal to Scotland and Wales and everywhere else. And I'm going to bring together, it's the equivalent of an English parliament, which I think we need if we do devolution properly. We need to have a voice for England, because otherwise they'll feel left behind in that. And I think that's what the metro mayors can be. So I'm really keen on seeing how that develops. I think the process of politics needs to be sorted out, because the mess we've got ourselves into is as a result of the deficiencies in our democracy, and that needs to be addressed. And that's not just about the behaviour of the people in the jobs. That's about making changes. And then I don't want to pin my colours to any mast in terms of. I'd love to have seen them really address the green issue. I am upset, and this is the thing, like compromise. I understand entirely why Rachel Reeves had to drop the commitment to £38 billion. Of course I do, and it's Liz Truss's fucking fault. It's obvious and it's pragmatic and it's clear. The last thing we want is interest rates to go through the roof because they start borrowing money in order to fulfil a manifesto policy that turns out it's too expensive for us to afford, and nobody wants to pay any more tax. So
I really want HS2. I am on the HS2 train like crazy. I'd love to get HS2 going, but
well, I get a feeling they might be able to resurrect that, mightn't they? Andy Burnham.
I hope so.
Yeah.
But it's about building it and getting the money to do it. But do they really need that? Because I don't know how much you know about transport in the north, but it's
listen,
a bit interesting.
I am very lucky to live in Brighton, and we have a great transport infrastructure here, basically. But even then, Andy Burnham was down here only last week, talking about helping the council here to take control of the buses again. And create an integrated travel system.
Yeah, that's something I think Labour should be talking about more. Their regional mayors are bringing back public transport services back under public ownership, and in South Yorkshire, we're doing that now with Supertram.
Right.
And there's talked about sort of going forward and fulfilling the original dream of Supertram, of it branching out from Sheffield, going from Sheffield to, like, although it does reach Rotherham now, it go to Rotherham, Doncaster, Barnsley,
Nobody
and
wants to
being a
go to
really
Rotherham.
integrated
I,
stuff.
I don't want to insult your area at all, basically, but my first wife's family came from Rawmarsh in Rotherham, basically, and there's no reason to get a tram there. I'm telling you now, basically. But no, funnily enough, at the weekend, I took a road trip because you get trapped in Brighton quite easily. It's so far south that everything is expensive to get to, except Gatwick, to be honest with you. And I have a much loved grandson who lives in Madrid, and therefore most of my commuting is to Gatwick and then Madrid to go and see him. But I had a rare weekend this weekend riding the trains to go and see my mother who lives in Peterborough and go to a party in Ely. So I was riding trains across the fens, looking at magnificent windmills in the fens. And but like my mum offered to take me back to the railway station, and she said, "What time's your train?" And I said, "Well, it'll be fine. I'll just drop me off at the station. There'll be a train." And then I looked on the thing and I went, "Oh, maybe on Thursday." Basically, it's like, whereas in Brighton, I can walk to the railway station and I can get a train every 10 minutes to London. So I'm totally aware that we need to do something about that. And Peterborough, where my mum lives, is a new town. It's where I was brought up. And when it was built as a new town under Labour governments, transport infrastructure was something that was integrated into the entire planning system, and now it's not. They are just developing huge tracts of agricultural land into housing, quite concentrated housing, and no new bus services, no new roads, nothing that makes it possible for you to not have to own two cars in order to live and exist. No solar panels on any of the roofs, things like that. You just, if you can get control of the planning system and say build beautiful, affordable housing that's sustainable, and we will help you.
Yep.
Build
That's
stuff
something I'm looking forward
purely
to.
for profit and squeezing money out of human beings, then fuck off.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to when that planning proposal comes forward. I want to know what Labour was really sort of going to do sort of about that. So I am quite looking forward to that from
Well, it's going to be tricky, isn't it? Because I think we got a lot of very surprised Labour MPs in rural areas, and their constituents are not going to be quite so keen on tower blocks being built basically outside the village. So, but then again, in Cambridgeshire, where I was this weekend, there's some really lovely, sustainable, affordable housing being built on the edge of villages in the same style as the village. And I don't know what facilities are being built, but obviously you need a new GP and a new school and everything else if you're going to start doubling the size of a community. But that's about centralised planning. That's about the things that the Tories just didn't do because
infrastructure.
Fundamentally, they're NIMBYs, aren't they? Anyway, so they don't want anything built anywhere. Don't get me started on the Greens on that one, but I've suffered enough at the hands of the Greens for the last few days. Basically.
Oh, yeah. Well, down the road is Sheffield, and well. I don't know how well you know about what happened to the Sheffield Greens, but yeah, they had an interesting civil war themselves.
What went on in this election, or
no? This was it is still ongoing. This is the NIMBY infighting in the Greens, because Sheffield is sort of a very sort of what's the best way to describe it? It's sort of a ruralish city where you could walk from the city centre about 20 or so minutes, and depending where you go, you can be out in
yeah, it's beautiful. I love it. It's a beautiful city. It's one of my favorites.
You have these different Green MPs, different areas saying, right, we need to build some affordable housing. Where can we build it? We can't build it here because it's a bit too congested. Can we build it here? The other Green MP turns around and goes, no, you can't build it there. That's Green Belt. It's just like, and then the infighting began, and it's something that they have not recovered from.
You see, the interesting thing, and the reason I've been getting in trouble is for the first time in 15 years, I got heavily involved in local campaigning because a friend of mine was running to be the Labour MP in Caroline Lucas's seat, Pavilion Brighton, which is central Brighton. And I think I probably learnt a lesson, which is actually, I like to think that for 15 years, I've entirely backed the wrong horse every single time. referendum, the Labour Party against Tory Party, etc., etc. This time, at least, I backed the wrong horse in locally and nationally. Basically, it worked out fine. But I get why people get upset about the things I've said about the Greens recently. But being honest with you, one of the reasons I got involved in local Labour politics was that there was a terrible, and Jess Phillips's constituency particularly has seen this recently, and West Streeting and Jonathan Ainsworth, a nasty, aggressive George Galloway type operation that had infiltrated the Labour Party and tried to take over its machinery. And I'm not going to name names of people that caused that problem, but Ed Miliband hopefully has learned his lesson about making membership cheap. And I was brought in to face down some of these people, to be honest with you, because it was a nasty anti-Semitic mess, and you wouldn't believe it in a city like Hove that was possible, but it was. And those people have all left and either joined the North Islington Jeremy Corbyn party, or they have joined the Greens in Brighton. And I've been approached by Green activists in Brighton to say, how did you get rid of them? And I said, well, sadly, you need people like me in your party. It will face them down, because if they're causing an uncomfort for you, basically, I understand it, but you are going to have to fight them to get rid of them. And that won't be popular with a lot of people listening. And toxic politics is just not healthy for anybody.
Yeah. I mean, I will say that as now. I think the Greens are going to have to deal with that. They're going to have a big problem with that, I think, for the next couple of years, because there was a couple of candidates that got caught out for some of the stuff they were tweeting.
They're being cuckooed. They literally are. They don't know what's happening to them. I think I genuinely believe that that's one of the reasons Caroline decided to step down, because the local meetings were toxic, and also their councillors were terrible in Brighton. They got the chance to run the place. They built something that nobody in Brighton likes, the I360, and they I think currently it's costing us as council taxpayers basically £36 million a year to sustain this eyesore. They're not great in government. They've proved it.
Yeah. So, well, again, not to continue the green bashing, but I could do it all day.
No, let me, because otherwise I have to go into J.K. Rowling, and I can't do that again. I've been battered this morning.
Well,
on that one, so.
if you are interested just to know like how bad the Greens are at infrastructure, then I definitely recommend looking up the blog of what happened to the guy who used to run Greens for HS2.
Okay. Oh.
Exactly. Greens for HS2. Ooh, weren't the Greens like incredibly against HS2?
I mean, immediately intrigued by that one.
He wrote an absolutely massive blog about what happened, the way they were treated in the party, how he thinks that if they don't sort out this infrastructure problem, that they're not going to be seen as like a real party. That it's a massive blog. They'll take you probably it's a good nighttime read essentially, but worth.
Listen, and I do want to take this opportunity to say this, right? I really understand why people vote Green. My neighbours are almost founding members of the Green Party, and I understand people that have a traditionally Green view of politics, and I personally regret that the Green Party have not managed to create the same kind of political infrastructure that you have in Europe for the Greens. They're pretty much sharing government in Germany and various other countries in Europe because they've got their act together. And so I think that's something that hopefully with 4 or 5 MPs now they can start to build on and do something about and widen their interests.
I think they've got to do a lot of growing. They've got to do a lot of growing, because now they've got 4 MPs. Suddenly there's going to be a media spotlight on them, and that spotlight might not be too kind when it finds stuff.
I had a lot of people on the doorstep saying, I normally vote Labour, but Labour's going to win, so I'm going to elect a Green for Brighton to have a Green voice. And I said, well, you realise they'll be sitting next to Nigel Farage, so do you think the media will cover them at all? They're just not. They're going to have to go out there and say something terribly controversial, basically, to get any coverage at all. And Farage is just going to steal the limelight whenever he can. And that's really what we need to all combat. And that's why I'm going to gently step away from my anti-green campaign at the moment. I really do wish them well. I'd like to see them build. But when you've got a majority like this for a progressive, left of centre at least party, I don't know how they're going to attract the people. So I think it might take 5 or 10 years and some disaffection or a split within the Labour Party for them to actually attract people.
I think one of the first things they should really try to be doing, if like giving advice to the Greens, they need to really be approaching the Labour Party not as an antagonistic force, but as a party that is willing to work together to get something done. Like, we want a goal of, let's say, Thames Water. We want to see that improved or nationalized, or like,
well, Southern Water. We are pumping shit into the sea 100 yards down the road from me, basically, and we have a Green MP and we had a Green Council, and I often argue, well, that voice obviously wasn't being heard in that situation. So working together with the 2 Labour MPs either side of us absolutely is what we should be doing here.
Yeah,
and I think if we can reach out and do that, you made me smile, because one of the things I felt I could say on the doorstep, but none of the Labour councillors could say, was that, I said, it's such a shame Caroline decided to resign, because we were going to make her Environment Minister. And people then say, well, you could make Sean the Environment Minister. I said, I'm sorry, nobody's ever heard of her. Caroline had some authority in this place, basically.
Yeah,
and actually, I genuinely believe it would have been a good idea. I did, when they say, is that true? I'd say, well, people have said it, because I used the Donald Trump technique, which is I said it, basically. But so I don't know if it would have happened at all. But, this goes back to what we were saying about reaching across the floor, and what you just said about, the Greens putting a hand out to Labour and saying, come on, let's do this together. I genuinely think that would be a good approach to this. And they could horse trade, 1 or 2 of their key strategies, basically.
Yeah. Well, that's what's going to happen probably in the next couple of days, committees. And we'll see which committees are renewed, which new committees we get, and more importantly, who's on those committees and who gets to chair those committees. So that's going to be, I think, something to watch to see there, because I think if the Greens play the cards right, and maybe then they can get on an environmental committee. If they really play their cards right, maybe they might get the chairperson. I doubt it. But they'd really have to like,
I think
play some good politics on that.
I don't think it would be healthy at all to have too many. I can't remember how the maths works on this, but Labour will end up with more members, won't they? Just because they've got more people in the House, basically. But so I think the appointment of chairs needs to be independent of the Labour Party to as much as possible, just to keep them. That's where the checks and balances of Parliament work. Yeah. And it's quite important to have a fair-minded opposition on those in those roles.
It's
interesting. Sorry, go on.
I know. It is the interesting sort of thing of what is going to happen, and we are still in early days. We are still in early days of this, government so far, and so far, I'm pretty happy. I'm pretty happy with the announcements we've seen, and pretty happy with some of the stuff we've seen. Yeah, I haven't got too much to complain about from my point of view.
It's almost like they've all been trained not to embarrass themselves, basically. They've had plenty of time to practice for this. Look, it will go wrong. We're going to lose the Euros probably on Sunday. I probably shouldn't say that, but and then suddenly our mood will shift. Basically, we'll just go.
I'm in.
Hang on, that was done under Keir Starmer, bastard. I did a very popular tweet yesterday about Starmer and Southgate, saying, it turns out boring competence gets results. And it's always funny to me that it doesn't matter what you tweet, somebody is going to find fault with it, aren't they? And the number of people that come back saying, I don't think Keir Starmer's boring. And I'm going, no, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is people say he's boring, but it turns out it's all right. And I'm now in fights with people about whether... It's like,
it's their politics.
It's always nice to conflate the two things, football and politics. But people have been reminding me that Harold Wilson got elected on a landslide in '66, and that was the last time we won a football tournament, a significant football tournament, I suppose. The men's team. I have to keep reminding myself that we have a manager that took us to 2 finals and won one of them, and
No, well, maybe this could be it. Maybe this could be the start of Cool Britannia 2.0.
Yeah, I think the men should have a chance of being reasonable at football. Basically, it's
Yeah.
the women
I
have
mean,
shown the way on that
I
one.
I really want the women to just keep on winning now and just be like putting the male team to shame.
Yeah,
Just
yeah. I genuinely much prefer the women's game. I'm not a big football fan, and that will get me into trouble as well. But I call it soccer ball on Twitter just to wind people up. But I genuinely much prefer to watch the women's game. It's for me, it's just more. It's the crowd, and it's the fact that so many of them are, clear about their sexual orientation, their gender, whatever. Basically, that you can't have that many players in the Premiership and not have at least one gay player. And yet, the England female team has got a number of women married to women, and they were very proud of that, basically. And I think things like
in fact,
that show the
that's
way.
something worth bringing up. Actually, Keir Starmer brought this up in his first speech. We've actually got the most LGBT people elected in Parliament.
Yeah.
I think that's very good. I think for if you are part of that community, that this must be a fantastic moment for you if you are in that community, having so many people of members in Parliament in that community. I can only see some good stuff.
And the cabinet, as well, and the West Streeting and Peter Carl from Hove is representing, and and also it's not an issue. It shouldn't be an issue. It's really not something. It's good. It's something we can all be proud of that we've progressed to that point, basically. But it just shouldn't be something that becomes a defining element of what they do. West Streeting. If anyone is going to start the first ball rolling of major outrage, it's going to be Wes.
I would not be
surprised. Whatever he decides to do
in
in the health service that doesn't involve spending billions on something, basically, is going to be interesting.
And we've got an independent review coming. I can't remember the guy's name who was asked, but he did one under, I think it was Brown. So he's asked for that as well. So we'll see what happens there.
The thing I think genuinely about that is the centrist position on this is the pragmatic position. As I've got leukemia and I've had that for 12 years, so I have a personal relationship with the NHS in my little bit of it, and there are definitely bits that are definitely better done by outside sources, and one of them is yesterday I had to go and I got a phone call from my Macmillan nurse, Kat. Which normally I'm supposed to have had a blood test before I have that phone call, and I'd forgotten because there was a bleeding election on, basically. So I contacted the phlebotomy department online. I booked an appointment for 2 hours later. I walked up the hill to the hospital. I had a blood test, and by the time I walked back down the hill along the seafront, I got the results on my phone, and I could ring my doctor and tell him the results. Now that's all done by an app and some software that is private, because you need to invest in that software and make money out of selling it to every GP and every hematologist and whatever around the world, not just in the NHS. So things like that make absolute sense to me. There are areas that we shouldn't privatise completely, and I think it's terrible that some of my nurses are in the ward are costing twice as much as others are being paid, and half of that money is going to profits, and that's wrong. That just doesn't make any sense to me. But
just to touch back on the NHS and technology, that's something that I wish people would bring up more, because not many people realise that we are, like, the UK is one of, like, the world leaders in, like, not only military, not military, medical device technology and app creation, and not a lot of people really realise that. And it's something that a marriage.
For a while, I worked in the TV industry, and one of the things that we are probably the second largest exporter of television content in the world. It's lucky we speak American. That's useful, basically, but actually, it's down to a Margaret Thatcher thing of launching Channel 4 and creating them as a commissioning body, not an owning body. So, for those that don't know, Channel 4 doesn't make any programs itself. It pays towards making programs from independent producers. And those independent producers own those television programs, and they license them to Channel 4, and then they can sell them elsewhere. So they make you nowadays you don't get full funding from any broadcaster in the UK. You have to make up the difference. But that licensing model allows those production companies to make money selling those shows elsewhere in the world. And when you've got an NHS the size of ours, with its commissioning power in software and technology and AI and scans and services and improving services with all of those things, that's a valuable piece of IP that if you restricted it to the UK and said it's created by the NHS in the NHS and never goes anywhere else, you'd be losing valuable opportunities to make it cheaper. Like, Channel 4 pay about 60% of the price of their TV shows because the producer goes off and raises the other 40% internationally. If we treat the NHS like that and say, if we create a way for doctors to work better, then that's sellable in America, in France, in Germany, in Spain, everywhere else, basically. And, that kind of thinking creates growth as well. It's exactly what we need.
And instantly, I've got to bring up the left-wing mentality there that will be saying, oh, anything private is bad. But as you've just brought up, there's a lot of opportunities there that can be really, really good for the NHS getting more money into it and for all kinds of things from it. And you've not got to be scared of the word privatization.
No,
sometimes.
I've been very well private. Commercial businesses providing services, basically. That's a different thing to privatization. The idea that you would make it a chargeable hospital. If I had to go and pay for my chemotherapy every month, I'd be bankrupt, basically. So I'm not a proponent for privatizing cancer care at all, basically.
Yeah, the NHS should
some of the services.
But
absolutely. But some of the services that are provided to me as a patient.
Yeah.
And in particular, I am a big proponent of this app that lets me see my blood results because I get graphs and charts, and I love all that shit. I love monitoring my blood levels in that level of micro detail, and that's something that they can only do because they're providing it to other people around the world, basically. So, we've dwelled on that one, but I think that's an area where it's going to come up. It will be complicated to explain to anyone. I will struggle to make a joke about it, so I'll probably just take the piss out of Wes's accent or something, basically, and deal with that. But
politics is going to go back to be boring and complicated, and you know what? That's not going to be a bad thing.
half the Labour front bench are too pretty for me to do cartoons of at the moment. One of the things you require as a caricaturist, you need weird hairstyles and beards and mouths and eyes in order to caricature people, and too much of the front bench at the moment are unknown to me or too pretty, basically. I can't do Angela Rayner because I've got a secret crush on her, basically. Yeah. So it's,
well, like I say, don't worry, because the Tory civil war is in full swing. You've got Suella Braverman versus Robert Jerrick kicking off. Badenoch having a go at Rishi Sunak.
How does Jerrick end up as the reasonable centrist? He's ex bloody UKIP. How does he end up as the reasonable centrist candidate in the Tory party? They're crazy.
Strange times are going to happen, but I'll tell you what. Once the leadership contest kicks off, once all that starts.
Do you think they'll do that too quick as well? That there's a lot of talk that what they should do is what Michael Howard did and make it a 6-month process to find a non-known name grow up.
I don't know, because the longer this goes on, the worse it's going to be, because they are infighting. They are going to be infighting like crazy. The 1922 committee stuff already saw that. We saw the first skirmish. The opening phase of the Tory Civil War was the 1922 committee skirmish, and you had Mark Francois come out and saying this vote was not fair. This vote was completely illegal.
Do you have any sympathy for a constituency that's seen the last 15 years of the Tory party and thought, I'll give Mark Francois another chance? Basically, it's ridiculous. But being honest, if I'm honest about my view of democracy, it's unhealthy to have a broken opposition. They need to get their act together at some point, or the Liberals need to take their place. And
that's what I was hoping for. I mean, it wasn't likely to happen, but we'd seen some of the polls where the Lib Dems were becoming the main party of opposition. If that had generally happened, that would have been absolutely fantastic. On a lot of levels, but
no. So I don't actually wish the Tories dead. I mean, they're gone for 10.
Yeah. They're gone for the next decade, at least.
barring Keir Starmer,
Yeah.
you know, doing something awful, and I don't quite know what that would be, basically, but something absolutely fundamentally terrible. Then you know, then I think the Tories are in trouble for 10 years, because if they choose to fight reform or become reform, that's crazy. That's just, you know, they haven't learned a single thing from this process.
Oh, they haven't. They haven't. One of part of my channels I've been covering a lot recently is what I'm calling the "What Went Wrong" series.
Right.
And this is a series of Tories, of current MPs, former MPs who've lost their seats, asking the question, what went wrong? How did we lose? And not a single one of them has been honest, been actually introspective about the problems that they had. They all think that, you know, the main problem is reform and Farage. When you look at it, it's like, actually, no, you lost a lot more seats to the Lib Dems than you did reform.
Yeah. Do you think? I think Jeremy Hunt might be the only one that's actually sort of said publicly that kind of, you know. But then he's ruled himself out for running for the leadership. Yeah. So, you know, no, I don't know. There isn't a moderate voice in the Tories, and I don't really care. You know, genuinely, I think they should just go away for a year and sort their act out and go play with Trump. Hopefully, we manage to do the same with Trump in America. You know, that whole Biden issue is a big thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
When I saw George Clooney coming out this morning, I thought, oh God, is he running? Oh no, okay. Because I think Clooney Trump, that would be interesting.
Oh, that would be really weird. Clooney, you know, Trump Clooney. Oof. I dread to think what that will be like. Dread to think.
My person, and I don't very often make predictions, but I think this idea that Biden could step aside in the next few weeks, and that Harris becomes president, and then she fights Trump from the position of being the president, and chooses the right partner. But I don't know if the Democrats, you know, I don't really know enough. I've done books about Trump, and I was obsessed with him after 2016. And I pay attention to American politics, but I kind of get, apart from Pod Save the World, Pod Save America, when you watch political commentary in America, you think, you know, I don't know why I pay so much attention to your politics. You don't give a shit about ours. I did, in fact, Jon Stewart the other day, I loved it. He introduced himself and said, so we could talk about the fact that France and Britain seem to have done the right thing in elections recently, basically, but we're Americans, so we don't give a shit. Basically, but I think Harris, running, which, you know, horribly, the left wing will hate me, but it protects their donors, and you need a lot of money in America to run. Yeah. And that feels to me like a powerful black president, female president, actually taking on Trump.
Yeah, I think it's their only option. I think they either keep as they are, or they switch to Harris, and then she picks you know, a good VP.
Harris Clooney, 2024. You heard it here first.
Yeah, I think she has to pick a very good VP to run with her. But as a recommendation, if you want some good another American podcast to listen to, The Majority Report.
Oh yeah,
by a guy called Sam Cedar.
Yeah,
they're really good. At what they do. They cover a lot of stuff from sort of America from a very sort of left-wing point of view, and they're very, very sensible. Some of the stuff what they do, but
it's a big challenge for them. I think they're facing, you know, they're facing potentially the end of the American hegemony, and that could be a nightmare.
I mean, Project 2025 is terrifying enough, especially when you can go and read it online. It's like.
Yeah, but the main thing that you all know is that Trump hasn't read a word of it.
Oh yeah, it's all going to be done for him. He just has to walk into office and just go do this, which is the terrifying part.
That's what's scary about it. Yeah, I think we might have averted it for a while here. You know, for me, I think our big right-wing movement in this country was around Brexit. And I think we got it out of the way in 2016. And, you know, when you see Europe leaning off and playing around with Le Pen and people at the moment, it's because they haven't had the same experience as we had.
Poland is another perfect example of that. They had Peace and Justice, I think it's the party was called, you know, for years. And now they finally got Donald Tusk in. and he got in because he was an alliance of centrist and left parties,
Left. Yeah.
and there seems to be a very, very clear pattern emerging of how you beat the far right. You know,
Yeah. And do you know, the other day I recorded a podcast. I did a couple of podcasts. There's a Trumpton one, which is silly humour with a friend of mine, Aidan, and then I do one where I just read Wikipedia or something, or read an article basically. I went back and read the 1945 Labour Party manifesto, which was written by, it was written by Toby Young's dad, ridiculously. So things have changed there, haven't they, in a generation? But also by the 5 ministers who actually ran the UK during the war, while Churchill went off and did his Boris tricks around the world. And there are insights in there that I then had to go and research, because they're referring to the fact that the Tories let the rise of Hitler happen, and also that there were war profiteers within the Tory party, and those are things that's not ever been in the dialogue, has it? Basically, and there it is, clear as day in the 1945 manifesto. So I think we are facing difficult times with at least a chance in this country. And
I think that's the thing. That's the thing. We are entering, I think, a new age of politics, and that is nothing but good for this country, because we've needed it for a long time, I think. And again, to go, as we said before, to go back to like competence and pragmatism and approach to sort of problems and solving them that way is going to have a government that does that so good. It's just going to be so good. But it's
and listening to people, but not necessarily doing what they're asked to do, and explaining themselves as to why they couldn't. That's what you need, isn't it? That's how politics works.
Yeah.
It's and I there was a little while I was thinking, well, maybe I could just. In fact, I got asked to do it. It's why I was very glad that you contacted me about this, because this is almost a way of me starting to think about this. I've been asked by a cartoon association in Sussex to do a presentation about Trumpton, about the story of Trumpton, and I was thinking before the election results that it'd be quite a nice punctuation mark in the Trumpton story, really, to go, okay, and then we got a Labour government. But it turns out that the last chapter is, and then Farage got elected. So it's not over by any stretch of the imagination, because I think he still needs to be one of the people that I don't let off the hook, basically.
Yeah, you'll have to have, like, I don't know, Windy Miller lead some sort of anarchic revolution against the mayor.
Well, that's one of the things that was beautiful about the beginning of the Trumpton community, which was that on Twitter, when it exploded, there were 150 Trumpton-related accounts created. And Windy Miller, who's a guy, he's an ex-copper from Kings Lynn who now runs a solar farm company. But he ran Windy Miller as the Green candidate for a while, basically. And he handed the account back to me nicely. But we've got, and they still exist. There's the Trumpton campaign for Real Ale. There's 2 Trumpton football teams that during the height of the Trumpton story were playing matches against each other on a Saturday on Twitter. And BBC Trumpton was reporting on the games, basically. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on here? It's amazing. So, that's the joy of Trumpton. The mayor is a benevolent dictator nowadays. And everybody seems fine with that. He's called Mr. Mayor, so who else are you going to elect, basically? But I like to think of him as the Jed Bartlett of Twitter, really. That is kind of our perfect politician. But I think a People's Revolution is the only guy that owns a car in Trumpton. So maybe there should be somebody should storm the town hall and take over. And Windy,
the Trumpton version of January the 6th.
Yeah, like many people in the Green Party, Windy Miller was just always drunk, so he'll never get round to starting a revolution, basically.
But no, on that note, we've been going over just an hour and 10 minutes now. So I think
that's crazy, and it's the first time I've started looking at some of the comments, and my God, people don't like me. That's good. Basically. Will do.
Well, like I say, I've got plenty of sort of good comments from here about sort of our conversation. So I'm very happy from this conversation, sort of on my point of view. But yes, if you have never heard of Trumpton before, or if you've never followed the Trumpton account, I believe you can follow you on Twitter, or well, X. Again, we'll call it Twitter. Um,
Yeah.
Twitter, and of course Facebook as well. So yes, go and give Trumpton a follow. I think there's big things going to happen with Trumpton. Maybe we'll see the mayor invade Chigley, and bring his benevolent dictatorship to the
Bloody
masses.
capitalist biscuit factory in Chigley. We don't like them. No, thank you very much for this. I really appreciate this. It's timely as well. I'm glad that I saw your message and we reached out to do this, and also that you've introduced me to this amazing streaming software that we should be sponsored by. I think because it's incredible, and people on my social media accounts, beware. I may start streaming in the middle of the night now. This is scary. So, I very much appreciate you doing that.
Oh, but yeah, like I say, thank you very much for like I say coming along today and joining. Like I say, if you want to find out more about me, come join me on YouTube. I'm Bowler Hat Man.
Do that.
Yeah,
good videos.
Currently,
I did research before I agreed to do this, and there's some great content on there. So
yeah, I'm currently covering the ongoing Tory civil war, which heating up quite nicely. If you want to know more about the Tory What Went Wrong series, we've got one about John Redwood writing about what went wrong.
Gosh.
Oh boy.
Wow.
But
these are all names that I hope we forget rapidly, basically.
But some interesting times that are going to happen, and honestly, it's going to get funny and it's going to get incredibly silly. And when the leadership contest kicks off, oh boy, am I there for that, with popcorn buckets ready.
I shall make you a few cartoons for your videos.
But thank you very much for joining me today. And of course, as everyone out there, wherever you are watching this from, leave a like, click on the share button. And of course, as always, to my followers, we'll see you all next time. So until then, we'll see you all very soon.
Bye-bye.